Fukushima, 2011, when the earth trembled and the sea rose. The morning of March 11th, 2011, began like any other on the northeastern coast of Japan. It was calm, ordinary. Fishermen prepared their boats. Children packed their school bags. No one had the faintest idea that in just a few hours, the world would witness one of the greatest disasters in modern history. A disaster born not from war or malice, but from the raw, unstoppable power of nature itself. At 2:46 p.m., the earth shook. It began as a low rumble, a vibration that rippled through the soil and the sea floor off the coast of Honshu. Then, in a matter of seconds, that vibration became violence, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake, one of the most powerful ever recorded in human history. The ground convulsed. Buildings swayed like paper. Roads split open. Cars and buses were tossed aside like toys. Power lines snapped. Entire cities went dark. Across the region of Tohoku, panic spread like wildfire. People ran for open ground, clutching each other as windows shattered and sirens blared. In Sendai, the shaking lasted nearly 6 minutes, an eternity in geological time. Inside the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, 240 kilometers north of Tokyo, alarms screamed. Reactor control rooms shook violently. Monitors flickered and died. Engineers grabbed onto railings as equipment fell from walls. But when the tremors finally ceased, there was a sense of relief. The plant had automatically shut down, just as it was designed to. Reactor control rods had dropped into place, halting the chain reactions. For a brief moment, it seemed the system had worked. The worst was over. They couldn't have been more wrong. The tsunami that followed. 41 minutes after the earthquake, the Pacific Ocean began to rise. At first, it looked like the tide was retreating unusually far from the shore. Boats lay stranded on the exposed seabed. Seagulls circled, confused. Then, on the horizon, came a wall of water, black, foaming, and relentless. The tsunami roared toward Japan's coast at 700 kilometers per hour. It slammed into the city of Sendai, swallowing homes, cars, and people in seconds. The wave reached heights of more than 15 meters, higher than most buildings in its path. And then it struck Fukushima. The plant's massive seawall, built to withstand a 6-meter wave, was no match for the fury of nature. The ocean poured over it like a breaking dam. Turbines, generators, fuel tanks, everything was drowned. Within minutes, the entire facility was underwater. Power was lost. Emergency systems failed. Diesel backup generators sputtered and died beneath the flood. Inside the control rooms, engineers could only watch as their monitors went black. Without power, the cooling systems that kept the reactor cores from overheating were useless. The reactors, though shut down, still contained enormous amounts of residual heat. And without cooling, that heat had only one destination: meltdown. The race against time. Chief Plant Operator Masao Yoshida immediately declared a nuclear emergency. He and his team of engineers, later called the Fukushima 50, began fighting a battle they were never trained for. Temperatures inside Reactor 1 were rising rapidly: 200 degrees Celsius, 400 degrees Celsius, 800 degrees Celsius. Pressure began to build. Hydrogen gas accumulated in the reactor building. Workers rushed to manually vent the reactors to release pressure, but the valves required power, and power no longer existed. So they went in manually, in radiation suits, with flashlights, crawling through dark corridors filled with debris and water. Every minute inside those rooms meant another dose of deadly radiation. Outside, the Japanese government scrambled. Prime Minister Naoto was briefed: cooling systems offline, pressure rising, explosion possible. He demanded real-time updates, but the situation was chaos. Information came late, incomplete, or wrong. Then, at 3:36 p.m. the following day, the unthinkable happened. A violent explosion tore through Reactor 1. The upper part of the building blew apart in a massive fireball. Debris rained down for hundreds of meters. The hydrogen gas had ignited. The world watched in horror as the footage aired live. a nuclear plant exploding in real time. It was a moment that brought back haunting memories of Chernobyl 25 years earlier. 2 days later, Reactor 3 exploded. Then Reactor 2. Each explosion released massive amounts of radioactive material into the air. Clouds of cesium, iodine, and xenon drifted across northern Japan. Inside the plant, Yoshida and his remaining workers refused to leave. They slept on concrete floors, ate dry rations, and worked around the clock, risking their lives to prevent total meltdown. One worker later recalled, "It felt like we were already dead, but if we didn't stay, millions more would die." Evacuation and fear. Within 20 kilometers of the plant, the government ordered a mass evacuation. Over 150,000 people fled their homes, some with only the clothes on their backs. Elderly patients were carried on stretchers, babies wrapped in blankets. Buses lined the highways, moving slowly through the chaos. In hospitals, doctors and nurses refused to abandon their patients. Many stayed behind, sealing windows with plastic and tape. They knew radiation was invisible, odorless, but lethal. Meanwhile, panic spread in Tokyo, 240 kilometers away. Supermarkets were stripped bare. Gas stations ran out of fuel. Rumors of a nuclear rain circulated online. Parents kept their children indoors for weeks. The international community watched with alarm. Radiation levels were being monitored as far away as California and Europe. For a time, no one knew just how bad it could get. Experts feared a full-scale meltdown, the worst possible scenario, in which the molten reactor core could burn through the containment vessel and into the ground, poisoning the water table for generations. The heroes of Fukushima. Inside the plant, Yoshida's team continued their desperate fight. When fresh water supplies ran out, they resorted to pumping seawater directly into the reactors, a last resort that would ruin them forever. But it was the only way to cool the molten fuel. At one point, the prime minister ordered the entire plant evacuated. Yoshida disobeyed. He knew that if his team left, the reactors would explode again, and half of Japan could become uninhabitable. So he stayed, and so did his men. They were called the Suicide Squad by the media, though they never used that word themselves. They simply did what they believed was right. For days, helicopters dumped tons of water from above. Firefighters sprayed hoses toward the reactors, standing in radiation-hot zones. Every drop mattered. By March 15th, all 4 reactor buildings had been damaged. Radiation readings spiked to levels hundreds of times the legal limit. And yet, slowly, the fires began to die down. The worst had been prevented, but the damage was already beyond imagining. Aftermath. In the months that followed, a massive cleanup began, a task that continues even today. Workers in protective suits scraped contaminated soil, sealed barrels of radioactive debris, and built temporary storage sites across the region. Entire towns were abandoned. Fields turned to weeds. The once bustling city of Nami became a ghost town, frozen in time. Dogs roamed the empty streets. Clock stopped at 2:46. Over 470,000 people were displaced across Japan. Many never returned home. The long-term health impact is still debated. While the immediate radiation exposure was lower than Chernobyl, the psychological toll was immense. Depression, anxiety, and suicides rose sharply among evacuees. Farmers who lost everything spoke of dying twice, once when the tsunami came, and once when the radiation came. The global impact. The Fukushima disaster shook the world's faith in nuclear power. Germany announced it would phase out all its nuclear plants by 2022. Countries across Europe and Asia reevaluated their safety protocols. Protests erupted worldwide, calling for renewable energy alternatives. But scientists also saw an opportunity to learn, to build safer systems, to understand human error, and to improve disaster response. The lessons of Fukushima became a blueprint for the future of energy safety. The human story. Years later, a few residents returned to the exclusion zones. Old couples reopened their family homes. Children born after 2011 came to see the towns their parents had fled. The cherry blossoms still bloomed. The sea still shimmered in the morning light. But the silence was different, heavy, knowing. Masao Yoshida never saw the full recovery. He died in 2013 from cancer, though officials denied it was related to radiation exposure. Among his team, many suffered long-term health problems. But their names remain etched in Japan's quiet gratitude. As one survivor said, standing before the ruined plant, "We were fighting something invisible, but we fought it for the living." Legacy. Fukushima was more than a nuclear accident. It was a story of courage, failure, and resilience. A reminder that progress always carries risk and that human strength is often tested in the face of the unimaginable. The earthquake and tsunami of March 11th, 2011, claimed nearly 20,000 lives. But it also revealed something deeper, the spirit of a nation that refused to give up. Japan rebuilt. Not quickly, not perfectly, but with dignity. And somewhere on the winds that blow across the Pacific, the lessons of Fukushima still travel. A silent reminder of how fragile and how brave humanity can be.